2, 3, 4.
Is it a scarf or is it half of a sweater? From what I've heard, it could be a third of a poncho. There's no excuse now not to be knitting, 'cause you can do it standing and you can do it sitting.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Truly Myrtle podcast. I'm Libby and this is episode, it's about 91 I think. 91? We're going to call it that. Welcome to the show. I spent the whole morning chasing sheep. I was supposed to record this ages ago. I got myself all set up and then I noticed that the sheep had leapt the electric fence, and so I spent the morning moving electric fences, trying to get them into a different area, and I've kind of failed because there are some still where they were. There are some in the new place. They're driving me bonkers, absolutely bonkers today. So you're lucky I'm here, because I just feel like sitting down with my knitting and forgetting about the rest of the day. But anyway, I am here. What I thought I'd do today is I would show you around my workspace. So I don't know about you, but I'm always keen to see the little spaces that other people work in, their craft rooms, their sewing rooms, their knitting corners, their offices. I find it endlessly fascinating. I was describing to my daughter the other day about how I organise everything in my workspace, and she looked quite shocked. And I don't think she realised that I was so... everything has a place. I know where everything is. I can grab it quickly. I think I've always been a little bit like that. There is a part of me that really fights over organisation. It's like I know I might have a tendency to really go into that, and so there is a part of me that fights it and doesn't let myself do it. I don't know what that's all about. It's really strange, but I do like order. I like to know where everything is. I can't bear wasting time. I think that's what it is. If I want to do something, I want to do it now. If I want something, I want it now. I just don't want to be looking endlessly for things I need. One thing I will say, though, is that my kids, one child in particular, likes to work at my desk and sit at my desk, and it drives me completely bonkers because she moves all my stuff. She uses my pens, she uses my paper, she uses up the paper on my printer. She doesn't put things back. She might play games here. She might do homework here. It drives me absolutely crazy. She has her own desk. She has her own space. We have a dining room table. There are other places. So, yeah, that drives me crazy, the way she does that. But I kind of get it. I used to love playing officers, and I used to love playing school teachers, and I used to especially love playing officers and libraries. I used to play libraries a lot when I was a kid, and it was lots of paper shuffling and organising things around and making things into categories and putting things in the right places. I did get endless fun out of that. I can remember I had a friend who lived around the corner, Emma, and we used to play a lot at her house. Her parents were artists, and they had a studio on one side of their enormous garage, and on the other side they had this sort of, I don't know what it was actually for, but we took it over, this area which we turned into sort of a playroom there. And we had desks set up. We used to do a lot of dressing up like olden days ladies. I remember that. She had a great dress up box. We used to do a lot of that. And then we'd organise ourselves into desks, and we must have had something with cubby holes. And I'm pretty sure those were the days when we used to go down to the bank and steal piles of deposit slips and withdrawal slips. And so we had quite a few of those, as well as paint chips from hardware shops. My father was always at the hardware shop. I had a lot of paint chips. So we had those sort of things all organised, and files and pencils, and we used to sit at our respective desks and play officers. She had one of those crank up old record players, so we used to have that on as well, and we used to play officers a lot. And I was probably quite old because I played a lot of imaginary games with Emma, particularly, until I was about 12. Heaps and heaps and heaps. We just loved it, had such a good time. So anyway, my love of organisation has been around for a long time. There's a photo somewhere of me, I don't know where it is, of sitting in my room. I was playing the cello So I must have been about 12 or 13. Maybe I was I don't think I was older. I think I was probably about anywhere between 12 and 13, 10 and 13. And I'm sitting in my room and it's just organized. My whole room is organized. I spend a lot of time, I used to have little ornaments. I've still got a lot of them, little ornaments on my dressing table. And I used to spend a lot of time dusting those and arranging things on my desk and making my room tidy. I don't understand why my kids don't like to do that. I just don't get it. I used to spend a lot of time just organizing my room, and my kids really don't, for the most part. They don't voluntarily. The one who likes my desk, she hasn't got her own bedroom yet. She's going to get her own bedroom shortly, and maybe then she will have some sense of organisation, but I don't think so. And she's not striking me as someone who does. So my kids just their rooms are like tips. They leave everything everywhere. So I live alone in this idea that I have organisation. My mum's pretty organised. I grew up, I was one of 5 kids, and it was a bit shambolic in our house. But you always knew where everything was. Everything had a place in our house. So I think I've inherited that from her. There was always a place for everything. It wasn't necessarily tidy, although she'll tell you it was clean. And yeah, so I did grow up with an idea that everything should have its own home. Not to say that she or I aren't prone to quite a lot of clutter, because both of us are avid makers, and when you're a maker, it's really hard to operate on a minimalist level, isn't it? In fact, a minimalist look doesn't really appeal to me. It doesn't. A lot of the time I look at things that are super minimalist and I just feel like no one lives there. I like to see signs of life in a place, and so particularly colour. I quite like a lot of colour around me, and I find it just warm and homely and comforting, I think. So I am drawn to kind of piling things up. Having said that, I'm not very sentimental. I try to be sentimental, but I'm not really. I think I'm a moving forward kind of person, and I do keep some things because I know I'm supposed to, but I don't have a huge drive to hold on to things just for the sake of it. I'm trying to think if I have anything like that. No, I think I can just move forward. Some of the happiest times of my life have been when all my possessions were in a pack on my back, and that was it. We had nothing else. We've done that several times in our lives, where everything is just, well, we've done it once in our lives where everything was in a pack on our back. My now husband and I did that. We travelled for about 3 months through Europe when we were in our 20s, and on our way to the UK to live, and we didn't have anything. That was it. It was all in the pack on my back, and it was hugely liberating, absolutely hugely liberating. And then the other time we travelled really with not much stuff was when we went from New Zealand back to the UK with 2 small children, and we sold a lot of our stuff before we left. We had some stuff that was in a container on the way, and then again we travelled for about 3 months, maybe a little longer, with our 2 kids around Europe, and we just had hardly any stuff. It was really good. I really enjoyed those times. So yeah, not overly sentimental. Anyway, I'm going to show you around. I don't quite know how I'll do it. I'll just wiggle my camera and tell you about where I put things. Now, what I will say is the area I'm going to show you today is my office, and everything I have to do with knitting, almost everything, is in here. So I have my stash is pretty under control right now. A year ago, maybe more than a year ago, I had quite a big sort out of my stash, and I gave a lot of stuff to other people. I let people have a sort of a free-for-all of things they wanted from my stash. Not everything, of things that I decided I probably wasn't going to use. And then the rest of it I sort of made some sense of, and I kept things that I thought I would use or might be useful, or that whatever. And now I have all my sort of things for designing separate from things that I just might use myself one day if I ever have time to knit things just for myself. So that's where we are. We're sort of in my officey space. I also have a sewing space. Now I'm really lucky. Our houses, New Zealand houses, are probably twice the size of the average UK house and half the size of the average American house, I think, from what I can gather. Our house here is about 250 square meters big, and my house in the UK was about 125. But my brother, who lives in the States, I think his house is twice as big as mine, or at least getting on for that. They seem to be massive, which I find quite daunting because that's a lot of cleaning, and I'm really off cleaning right now. Anyway, so I'm lucky because I have the space I'm in is actually in our hallway. We have a house that was built in the 1980s. It's god awful ugly, this house. It needs a lot of work. It's got good bones, but it's really not the house that it's not the house of my dreams yet. And I mean, the walls are all wooden. I'll probably show you as I go along. The walls are all solid wood. They're beautiful wood, but it's a lot of wood. It's a lot of yellow. So we're slowly doing things to change our house. But so it's sort of 1980s. It's one level. We've got quite a few bedrooms, which is great. We're now down to just one bathroom because we've just turned one of the bathrooms into a bedroom for this daughter who likes to use my desk. But there is a space to put another bathroom, so we're going to do that at some point when we save up the money. So what I've done is we've got 2 living spaces in this house. Originally it was a main house, and then they had a granny flat. And a granny flat in New Zealand is like an adjunct to a house. It's all sort of joined together. This had a door that separated, which it's just like one big house. You would never know it was a granny flat. But the end of our house was originally a granny flat, so the idea was that the people who built it, one of their mothers would live here. So we have 2 living areas, and one we use a lot because it has our fire in it, and it's cozy in the winter. And the other one we don't use so much. It's a bit cooler. It's got an open fire, but it doesn't really heat the room. So I've taken over, of that big space, I've taken over probably just over half of it, but a bit more. Well, the whole thing, really, because I sit down there quite a lot to knit. But one half has got a couch and a couple of chairs and a coffee table, and the other half has got an old table that we had as kids that my uncle made, which is actually an old door on a steel frame for my sort of cutting out table. It needs to be higher, actually. I need to put it on the blocks to make it higher. And then I've got another old table which used to be my mum's big old desk. It's another old door again on trestles, and I have my sewing machines on that. I've got a big shelf in there that has all my fabric on it, and then the ironing board is down there as well as the girls have got a couple of tubs of fabric. And then all the stuff I keep all my samples down there. I quite often block things down there if I haven't just spread them out on the floor in my room. And I keep everything I use for shows down there. All my boxes of patterns are down there in my rail. So it's sort of a all-purpose area. So I wasn't going to show you that today, although if you're interested I'll show you another time. That's reasonably orderly, and my sewing stuff is pretty orderly. It's just my stuff for shows kind of comes and goes, and I haven't quite figured out a system for keeping it so the moths don't get it, or that I attract moths. So it's sort of loose. I've got to think a bit more about that. Anyway, I sort of spread myself out. I knit everywhere. I knit in bed. I knit here. If I'm watching something on my screen, I knit down in that space where I have my sewing. I knit in the room that we call the playroom. So we have a sitting room, which is where I have my sewing, and then we have the playroom, because originally when we moved in here that was the playroom with a couch and things in it, so it's just known as the playroom. I knit in there a lot because we get a lot of sun in there in the afternoon, and it's really nice and comfy to sit and knit there. I think that's about all to kind of give you some background. So I'll show you around here a little bit. I just thought you might be interested to see what I've got and how I organise my stash and my books and the projects that I'm working on and the designs that are upcoming and where I put stuff. So shall we have a little look? Here we go, everybody. We'll have a little pan view of my little posse in the corner, or in the side of the hall. It's a bit cold today, so the window's a bit foggy. But that's basically where I sit, in this little edge of the hall. And if we look down here, that's the bathroom door. And then behind us to my left is my bedroom. And right behind me is another bedroom. And if we go up that way up the hall again, we get back to my kitchen. So that's where I am. Shall we have a little look and see what's what? I've got this old trolley I inherited from my mum. And it has all my sort of paper and bits and odds and sods with my printer. I've got project bags hanging on it that I will get to. Some of them are sewing projects, some of them are knitting. This little bag here is some dishcloths which I've got to finish, and then I've got other bits and pieces in these bags here, and they're just things I can grab if I'm sort of in between things and I need something to do. I keep all my paper, my microphones, bits and pieces, business cards and leaflets I have for shows, and all sorts of things in there. Stationery like items, they're my sock blockers. Then I've got two of these big cubed shelves, and they're not fancy, but they've just been absolutely fantastic. So on the top of those, the first one, I've got old knitting needles, which, to be honest, I never use anymore. I only use them in my classes sometimes to help you find out where your underarm point is. It's really helpful to stick a knitting needle under your arm. I have a basket of swatches, which I can't show you because when I've done something, like I've submitted an idea or I've swatched something and it's not ready to be turned into a project yet, but it's in the works, or I've got an idea fleshed out for it, it sits in that basket, and I've got some things in there that will happen. I've got my grandmother's old hat blocker, and the hat blocker's great. She used to make a lot, if not all, of her own hats, my mum's mum. So that's her hat blocker, and I've used that recently to block a hat, my bobby hat. This box here has swatches in it. I'll show you. And what I like to do is keep lots of, not all of, but lots of my swatches, and then I can take them to classes to show people sort of how big I make my swatches and what is a good swatch, how I swatch in the round and I swatch flat. I do a variety of things. So I like to keep a box of swatches handy so that I can use sort of recent patterns and recent swatches. That basket up here is all sorts of things. There's spindles in there, there's doll making supplies, all sorts of things in there, needle felting, lots of little supplies, so we know where to go to get those. Now this is where I sit when I record the podcast. I just sit right in front of there. So these are the books that are behind me. I've got them in sort of a rough order. There's a whole bunch missing from this cube. This is all my Stitch dictionaries. And when I do my podcast, which lots of you have asked for about good books for designing, I'll go through those a bit more. But there's that whole section here is missing, and you'll see where they are in a minute. They're in a project box. I've got more books about designing. There's some really great ones in there, and just useful things, techniques and things I reach for all the time, and it stretches out over to here. I also get a lot of patterns from other designers off Ravelry because I like to read them, how they've written, what do I like, what don't I like, an idea that I've had, how would they actually write it out, and things like that. So I have lots of patterns from other designers printed out as well that I purchase. Underneath here, I've got the yarn that I sit in front of. It looks like a motley mess, really, but it's not. I know what's here. So on the end, that's all yarn that will be great for sweaters and heavy shawls. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes I just buy one skein, or I'm given a skein, or some of these I've got a couple of skeins. But that's not enough for a jumper, but it's enough to either swatch or use for a shawl. So that all sits here. That's all sort of heavyweight yarn, DK, Aran, worsted, bulky. That's all in there. And next to that is fingering weight yarn. So I like to sort of keep things together by weight rather than colour. So I've got some in here that I've bought. Look at this lovely stuff I've bought recently. This is the one here. This beautiful green from Tuscan Knit. So I've got enough of that to make a shawl. It's absolutely stunning. I've got some real treasures in here. Some I've wound up, ready to go. Others are still waiting. But that's sort of it's actually got really small. I did have a much larger shawl stash. I made a lot of shawls from stash. I made a real effort to sort of get on top of what I've got. I've also got things like here. This is some quince chickadee. I mean, that will be great to swatch for a lighter weight jumper. So I have got stuff for lighter weight jumpers in here as well. I've got some knit by numbers, just in a plain, because I've got the colour cards. I'll show you that soon. So there's just a variety of stuff here that I know that I want to have a play with at some point. I bought some, is it Isaga or Isaga? Isaga, I think. Yarn, so I can have a little bit of a swatch with that too. So that's all sort of sitting, waiting for me. This cube here is full of, there's lace weight yarn on the end. I don't have a heck of a lot of lace weight yarn, but I do have some very beautiful lace weight yarn, which I've balled up. I don't normally like keeping my yarn in balls. I prefer to keep it in the skein. So the plan with this cube is actually, although all my lace weight, not all, but a lot of my lace weight yarn is here, it's to skein this stuff up. So some of this stuff I've swatched and I haven't used yet. Some of this stuff I've got when I was away and then I've started and things haven't worked out, so I've unravelled. There's not enough to do any one big thing with, although I could do a hat with any of those, I guess. But my plan is to skein it up, and that's just a job that I don't tend to get to that often. Below that I've got a basket of sock yarn and calf finished socks. So I have got socks that I can go back to if I'm travelling. I've got some monkey socks there. I've got some stripy socks with stray cat yarns on the go. I've got some socks of Mr. Myrtle's that I made years ago that need darning. So he kindly put those in there for me so I can darn them. But that hasn't happened yet. But I've got a range of sock yarn in there. My mum quite often, I won't say raids, I give my mum skeins of sock yarn on a fairly regular basis, so that basket tends to stay under control. Now these cubes, I've started using all these big tubs lately and they're fantastic. I'm really enjoying using them. I used to have black ones, and I don't like black ones because moths love black ones, and I found I wasn't in this area actually, it was quite a while ago, and I found that the moths made their way into one of my black bins, so I think the dark just didn't help. So I've moved to these cream ones. Now this yarn in here and all of these tubs down here is all yarn, sort of my personal stash, not my designing stash. So can you see in there? There's all stuff in my, wrong tub, all my designing personal stash of things that I'm going to get to, that I'm not going to use for designing, that I'd love to make stuff with, that either for me or the kids or for friends. So that's all in those cubes. That's not quite all of it, but I have really, I mean, a lot fits in these cubes, to be honest, but I have had a couple of years ago, I had a big sort out of all my stash, and I went through and kept the stuff that I wanted to keep, and then I let my friends and family have a bit of a free-for-all on the rest. So I've managed to really cull my stash. That cube down there is tax stuff. Ugh, boring. So we move along. I have a lovely view out my window, but you can barely see it today because it's cold. And there we go. I have a lovely view out into my front paddock when it's not all steamy in this house. There's my desk, and I have my hard drive, the essential bit of kit that Mr. Myrtle organises for me in case everything falls apart. And then I have my laptop with another screen. Now, I don't know what I did before I got my second screen. I love having two screens. I cannot survive with one screen now. I use two screens all the time. I have something open on one screen. I can move it to the other screen. It's just, it's fantastic. If you haven't tried two screens and you're designing, definitely try them. I have all sorts of things on my desk here. I have my trusty calculator. I always need sticks. These little pots, things always go missing. I've got headphones and paper clips and stitch markers. I've got more stitch markers in this little pot, which is really cute. So if I'm sitting at my desk working, I've got a stash of stitch markers. I've got my camera remote and bulldog clips and other bits and pieces in there, so it's handy in my hand cram. And then I have a little selection of notebooks. Some of these are it's my old diary from the other year, last year. I've got a little notebook that I keep lots of notes in for my projects. That one can go in a project bag. This can also go in a project bag. It's really useful to have these little notebooks. That's a slightly bigger one that I use the same, and there's a Stationery sketchbook. Have you guys seen these? These are really great Stationery sketchbooks, and there's a lot of notes in that Stationery sketchbook. Don't know if you can see, it's really hard to see, but can you see how there's sketched bodies on them? So you can actually draw design ideas on the bodies. They're fantastic. I have purchased in the Kickstarter last year the My Body model, which I haven't used yet, and I do have to try. But the My Body model, you can put in your own measurements and it prints you a croquis of your own figure, which is amazing. And I bought one of the designer, I think I bought the designer level, and so I get 3 options of bodies in that. And what I'm going to do is do one of my smaller standard sizes, my standard size, and from my patterns, not my exact size, the standard size that I use, and then a larger size, and then I'll be able to sketch onto 3 different body shapes. Anyway, that's an aside, but I do find those really useful. I used to be a good drawer. I think my drawing skills have failed me over the years. So it's useful to have a croquis to draw on. This is my diary. I have a moleskin diary. I went for a bigger size this year, which I love because I do like to take up a lot of space when I'm writing. This is the one I had. If you listen to the podcast for a while, you'll remember that I talked about how I set up exactly this format in my bullet journal, and I found that moleskin produced one exactly the same. So it just was exactly what I needed, and it was easier to buy it. So it's got the week down one side, starting on a Monday, which suits me down to the ground, and on the other side it has a blank page which I write all the tasks for the week. I don't tend to write daily tasks. I write everything I want to do in a week, and then I can sit down and I can work out what day things might happen. I can put in all the other things that happen, whether we've got netball or rowing or whatever else we've got, any other appointments, and then I can just see as the week goes on what I've got to do. That works better for me than trying to do day by day. Now, if you've also been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll remember that I keep all my scrap paper in a bulldog clip, and so I've always got a big stash of scrap paper to write notes on. If I'm doing a podcast, I can write notes. I can do show notes on that. I can use it when I'm drawing out ideas. I can do maths on that, all sorts of things. I just find it really useful to have a big swatch of scrap paper. And then under there, I've got some bigger notebooks that I use for designing things. There's just sort of a pile of things that I reach for at the moment. That's what I need handy. I try and keep a lot of ball bands. I used to be really religious about it, and I'm not now, but I do keep ball bands. I probably don't need all these, although sometimes they're useful because it can be quicker going back to here than it can be looking stuff up on the computer. And it just tells me this is what I use for my timely cardigan. One of the ones was called Hot Mess. Just try and focus on that. Hot Mess was the colourful skein I used from Skein Australia. This is Yarn Floozy. I've just finished my cardigan with Yarn Floozy. This is the gold colourwork one that I'm working on, so that's one of the ball bands from her, just so I have them handy. Old Spinning a Yarn, I've used her, that moche cardigan I did. There's some of her ball bands. What else? I got Manuia Toto. I did my Silver Stream shawl with her yarn. So I've got a whole bunch of ball bands in here, as well as cards and things people have sent me, and notes and things that just might be handy, addresses that I've got from dyers and things like that if I need to get hold of them. I've got a pot of things, lots of clips. I tend to need clips and extra plugs because I still haven't got most of my things converted from the UK plugs to, that is a UK plug. Oh, I know why I've got that, because one of my boards that I plug into the wall is actually on a UK board, so that one's really handy for New Zealand to the UK. Other bits and pieces for my computer there. This basket is full of art supplies, and I've got all my coloured pencils, all my sort of greys and all sorts of pencil case things in here that I use for sketching and drawing, and I've got lots of, I can't really see what I've got in there, but it's lots of coloured pencils in there. And then I've got some beautiful coloured pencils that I bought that are great for sketching, and I had an iPhone from the kids and an old stamp that Mr. Myrtle gave me with my name on it. So that's sort of all my pencils and things. I try not to keep that one so obvious or it will walk. All the kids have their own pencils, but I just try and hide that one from them so they don't steal my stuff. And then if we move to the other side of the room, you will see my chair that I've pinched off my son, which is really helpful, really comfy. I'm not giving it back. On the other side of my little posse, I've got more of those big square shelves and then another small one. So on this set of big square shelves, that's more personal yarn. That's more ends of balls. I tend to put a lot of skeins that I've finished, when I've finished working on them, go into that basket. I used to get the Ply magazine when I was doing more spinning, and extracurricular magazine, so they go in there too. Oh, they just all get kept up there. Extracurricular was a lovely magazine, and they don't make it anymore. But it was a really nice little magazine that they made in New Zealand. It was sweet. I liked that one. Anyway, I've kept those ones because they can be useful to have a look through. I keep my camera up here.
next to my Renaissance prints. And then I have more books over this side. So I keep all my receipts and things in this box here. Things from the bank. That goes to my woman who does my books. She's fantastic. And then I've got some books about branding, which I should read properly. And then I've got things that I've had for a long time. When I first went to Knit Nation many years ago, I bought, 2010, I've talked about this story before, but I bought that book when I was there because I was just thought, I want to dye something. So I bought that book and some wool and some dye, and I did dye something. After that, Mr. Myrtle got me this lovely book on felting, which is fantastic. Crocheted snowflakes, I've made those. Knitted farmyard, which always sounds great, no kids ever play with it. Making dolls, all sorts of things. This book I thought was great, this book on the end. I found it in a second-hand shop, and it's called The Loving Stitch, and it's a story of, I'm going to show you better so you can see, it's a history of knitting and spinning in New Zealand. I thought that was a really lovely book to base something on, a collection or something. Anyway, I'm going to have a think about what I do with that, but that was quite a find, I thought, in a second-hand shop. Now, this is my little cube, which is by no means all of the books I've got, because some of them are in other places, and some my mum has borrowed off me, but these are patterns of other people's and pattern books generally. So I have Lane magazine, I have a few of these interpretations books. I really like seeing how Vera and Hohi write their patterns. I find that really interesting. Same with Justinia. I think her patterns are well written as well, so I like to see what she's up to. This one I've had a long time, Jane Richmond. That's a really lovely book actually. I really loved my Grace cardigan I've made out of that. I made several things out of that. Men's knits I've never used, but always thought maybe I should have a go. Aramesu magazine, the Woods magazine that came out. Oh, lovely Renee. If you don't follow Renee's podcast, you should. She's absolutely lovely. So I've got a couple of her books here. Anna Maltz's books are beautiful. I just love them. She's totally whimsical. Look, I'll show you inside. They're absolutely beautiful. And if you're thinking about doing a book, I think that's the other thing. Look at what other people have done for layouts and colours. And I love her stuff. I love her books. They just look beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It's really my cup of tea, that. Colourful and fun and, yeah. I find it very inspiring. Anyway, what else have I got here? Hannah Fettig's books are always good to have a read of. Brooklyn Tweed. I've got a few Japanese pattern books which I can't read, but they're really inspiring to look inside and make me sort of think about different ideas of ways of doing things. All sorts of things I've got in here. So I showed you that one last week. And then I've got some old books that I've had. I mean, I got this probably about 2006. I've knitted almost everything in it. When we went on that big trip around Europe, and I said with the two kids when they were 2 and 4, that's the book I took with me. Just that book. That's all I had. And I bought wool as I went around, and I took yarn with me, and I knitted and knitted and knitted that whole trip, and I made them pretty much everything out of that book, I think. There's another one of Renee's books here. Tin Can Knits is great. Yeah, there's lots of things. And then at the end, look at these. These are really old. There's something that's got something of mine in it, so I'm keeping that for posterity. I'm not quite sure what to do with it. Look, when my babies were little, they used to wear stuff like this. They were very much babies, old-fashioned babies. My mum I made that one actually. Pretty sure I made that one for one of my babies. But they used to wear a lot of these sort of, well, they did fine wool cardigans and leggings and helmets and bonnets, and someone's had a go at that one. There's all sorts of beautiful patterns here, so I've kept them because I will make them again for my grandchildren, no doubt, if my children want to dress their kids like that. But they're so warm, and mine weren't quite as frilly as that, but they all had cardigans and helmets. Now that's my mum's writing, and she's written her mum's baby bonnet. Little Angora 2-ply wool. I can't remember what that one looks like. Mum will remember. But that's her baby bonnet written out. And here we are, 2 raglans up to 9 months. Oh, aren't those pretty? Really pretty little old-fashioned patterns. So my kids used to wear a lot of these sort of things. Some of them have a random page on the back. They used to have bonnets, cardigans, leggings, helmets, balaclavas. I used to love little balaclavas. My mum used to make those, and all sorts of little things. Anyway, this is a random pile. It could be better sorted, actually, but when I know I've got something, I tend to go here for it. I have a whole folder that I've printed out of squared paper, knitter's graph paper, which is really useful. Some extra notebooks that I need. I used to keep a lot of my pattern stuff in folders. So some of these are old patterns. I need to go through and work out what I still want. I've written long pages of things for ideas for classes and things to write about on the blog. That's all here too. Things I use for classes, like my die triangle I did. I'm sure I've talked to you about that before on the blog. I've got colour wheels in here that are really useful for teaching colour class that I do. There's all sorts of things in here, so that's just my kind of, if it's somewhere, it's going to be in there. Now underneath here I've got more yarn. This cube is dedicated to yarn that has a name, like it's got something on it. Not that one. I bought that one and it wasn't what I was expecting, so I'm having a go at swapping that for something else. But this is some beautiful yarn I got from Bonnie at Union Fibre. That's destined to become a jumper. I've got some white gum wool. I've got some DK here, which is for my DK Timely, which will be coming later in the year. So that all has a purpose. I know what's going to happen with that yarn. The next bin, which I love this one, there's enough yarn in here for about 15 sweaters or cardigans. It's all garment lots, the whole lot. So I've got everything from beautiful yarn from Eden Cottage. That'll make just a glorious cardigan, I think, that one. I've got some tuku wool here, which will also make a really beautiful cardigan. I seem to be liking a lot of cardigans lately. So I've got enough of that, which I picked up somewhere. This colour, I just love this colour. So this is from Skein Queen, and I made a cardigan years and years ago, which is almost at the end of its life, but not quite, out of this exact yarn. So I wanted more because I just thought it was so hard wearing. It's the Enchant one from Skein Queen, Baby Alpaca Silk Cashmere. Doesn't sound like it would be hard wearing, but that cardigan has been so good. So mine was in more of this colour, more of a caramelly colour, but I thought that green was beautiful too. What else have I got there? I've got some lovely BFL silk. I've got 2 lots of that from Linda at Kettle Yarn Company in the UK. I've got enough lace weight to make a couple of things down here. I've got all sorts in here. This is my sort of stash of jumper stuff. And then moving over, I've got more. There's more, enough here. This seems to be a little heavier. Enough here to do jumper lots in this pile as well. So this one I just got the other day. Loop were having a, week before, Loop had a day where Loop in London, where they donated 100% of their profits to a great organisation. So I decided I would buy some of this yarn, which I've been wanting to try for ages. And it's lovely and cosy and chunky, and that is just my colour. I wear a lot of that colour. So I got enough of it to make a jumper. And that's up there waiting for me. So there's all sorts there. I've got outlaw yarn. I've got a bit of Farmer's Daughter Fibres, a bit more Eden Cottage. This is O wool, the organic wool. It's really lovely. So there's lots there, waiting, looking at me, waiting. And underneath, these are bins that are in action, although they might not have actually been started, but they're my in-action designs. So you'll see this is where a lot of my dictionaries have gone, into this bin here, because this is the first one I'm working on. And I'm just working out what I'm going to do. I've got needles in that bin. I've got yarn in that bin. And I've got, everything I need. So I can just grab my whole bin and go for that one. I've got stuff in all the bins that I'm sort of in the throes of doing. So that's current designs in progress. And then if we move on here, I've got my last little bits and pieces. So this basket I'm trying, because I have a tendency to leave things all over the house. And I noticed that the thing I'm working on at the moment isn't actually in there. But this is stuff which I'm doing. So this is some of that Union Fibre that I'm about to swatch. So I've put that in here as well. I've got my Notions pouch. And if I can just dump my stuff back in here, then I know where it is. So it's actually helpful that it's next to my bedroom. So when I finish in the evening, I can grab my bag. And the idea is that I throw it in there. But I wasn't home last night, so I've left it out as I walked in the door on the dining room table. There's a bowl of yarn that I've just finished, but I'm not quite ready to put it away yet. I've just finished my cardigan, my colourwork cardigan, and I've put all the yarn there. Just it's not quite ready to be totally finished with it. Down here, I've got all linen and cotton. There's some beautiful stuff in here. Some stuff I probably won't design with, but I've kept it here anyway. It's stuff I've bought. Oh, that's beautiful, that cotton glace from Rowan. That is actually really nice. I got that a long time ago. I have to check if they still make it before I do anything with it. But I've got some shabui and I've got some quince. I've got all sorts of things in there. That's all sort of lightweight stuff. That's my basket of notions and blocking wires and my scales, which you can't live without, DPNs, other needles, tape measures. That's sort of all my notion stuff. And then underneath I've got a whole box of project bags and little pouches that are useful for things, but I've got lots of project bags and things in there. And then finally I've got this bucket here, which has got all my colour cards in it. Now, colour cards are fantastic. Sometimes people give them to you. Blacker gave me this one, which is just lovely to be able to see all the colours and feel the yarn before you decide on something when you make a big purchase. I've got some from Tandy that I used recently. I've got a whole lot in that bag. There's all sorts. White gum wool, because I've got some white gum wool to swatch, but I don't know if I'll use those exact colours, so it's useful to see what else they've got. And then I just bought a whole lot from Brooklyn Tweed. Here they are here, some of them. This is just the Arbor one, and they're beautifully presented, the Brooklyn Tweed shade cards. So it means that I can just buy one skein, which I've got, one skein of Arbor, and then I can decide, once I've swatched it, I know sort of what the stitch count will be, I can go back and decide if I want it in a different colour, or what other colour I want. So that's useful, my colour cards. I find those great. Anyway, that's my little space. I hope you've enjoyed having a little look around. That's where I sit and do all my work. I can sit there and watch things on my screen. Oh look, I've made it go funny now. I can sit there and watch things on my screen if I'm watching a podcast or something. We don't have a TV, so it's better if I sit here and watch it rather than just watch it on the laptop somewhere else. And yeah, so that's my little space. Hey, I hope you have a lovely couple of weeks. I've come back to you. I've got an interview for you in not next week, but the week after. So tune in. I've got a lovely interview with someone that I think you'll want to hear from. And I hope you have a lovely couple of weeks. Do lots of knitting, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Take out your needles. We're casting up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I got a official love you. You can do it, Mary. You can do it, John. Is it a gnome or some other homely creation? Wait and see. It might even be for a teapot. There's no excuse now not to be knitting, 'cause you can do it standing and you can do it sitting. Take out your needle, we're casting up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I got official love you. You can do it, Mary. Yeah, you can do it, Mary. You can do it, Mary. And you can do it, John. Gilbert, what are you knitting? There. What are you knitting?
Nothing, man. I crochet.